Welcome to Notebook Summaries. In this installment of our quick country histories, we're diving into the absolutely epic story of England.
So how exactly was England made? We're going to trace its journey all the way from prehistoric lands to a unified kingdom that, believe it or not, would one day sit at the very heart of a global empire. It's quite a ride. All right, to make sense of this huge story, we've broken it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with forging a kingdom, then move to crown, crisis, and the law. After that, it's Reformation and Revolution, then Union, Empire, and Industry, and we'll finish up with modern England's changing role. Okay, let's dive right in. Our story begins way back, in a time of constant movement and conflict, long before anyone had even thought of the word England. England's story begins long before it even had a name. We're talking ancient history here. The first human tools found are over 800,000 years old. Over millennia, you had these waves of settlement that just kept coming, shaping the very bedrock of its culture. You had Neolithic farmers, then the Bronze Age, and eventually the Celtic Britons of the Iron Age. Okay, so to really understand early England, you've got to know the 4 key players who shaped it. First, you have the Britons, the original Celtic folks. Then, the Romans show up and rule Britannia for nearly 400 years. After they leave, in come the Anglo-Saxons, these Germanic tribes who set up their own kingdoms. And just to make things interesting, the Vikings arrive, first raiding, then settling. All 4 of these groups fought and mixed, and each one left a huge mark on the land and its language. So, after the Romans packed up and left, the Anglo-Saxons didn't just create one big country. Nope, they set up a bunch of different kingdoms, what historians call the heptarchy. Think of it like a massive game of Risk, with these 7 kingdoms, like Northumbria, Mercia, and Wessex, constantly fighting to be top dog. And it's funny, out of all that chaos, something incredible happened. The constant threat from the Vikings actually pushed the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to unite. The Kingdom of Wessex really stepped up, and they managed to rally the others. Ultimately, it was a king named Athelstan who finally defeated the last of the Viking strongholds and became the very first king of a united England. So now we're moving into an era where this brand new English state was forged through, well, a whole lot of foreign conquest and internal power struggles. 1066. If there's one date you remember from English history, make it this one. This is the year William the Conqueror's Norman invasion completely defeated the Anglo-Saxons at the Battle of Hastings. It was a total game changer. And this conquest, it led to some profound changes. I mean, the entire English ruling class was basically replaced with a French-speaking aristocracy. The language of power literally changed overnight. And to get a handle on his new kingdom, William commissioned this massive survey, the Doomsday Book, to know exactly what everyone owned. Now, for centuries after that, you see this constant struggle between the kings and their powerful nobles. And it all came to a head in 1215 with the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. Basically, the barons got so fed up with King John that they forced him to agree that the king was not above the law. This was a huge deal, a real cornerstone of English law. This rivalry between different royal houses got really ugly in the 15th century with the Wars of the Roses. We're talking about a brutal 30-year war of succession between 2 branches of the royal family, the Lancasters and the Yorks. It finally ended when Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian, claimed the throne, and he did something brilliant. He united the 2 houses by marrying Elizabeth of York, kicking off the famous Tudor dynasty. All right, the next era we're looking at was one of just radical upheaval. England broke its old religious and political bonds, and the results were, well, explosive. So what kicks all this off? A king's desperate need for a son. King Henry VIII was obsessed with having a male heir, but his wife, Catherine of Aragon, couldn't give him one. He asked the Pope for a divorce so he could marry Anne Boleyn, but the Pope said no. So Henry's solution? He just broke away from the Catholic Church, made himself the head of the new Church of England, and granted his own divorce. This one move reshaped the entire nation. So after the Tudor dynasty ends, the Stuart kings come down from Scotland to take the throne. And right away, they start clashing with Parliament, which was getting more and more powerful. They fought about everything, money, religion, and the big one, who really had the final say. And that conflict, it boiled over into a full-blown civil war between the parliamentarians and the royalists. It led to something unthinkable at the time, the execution of a king, Charles I. For a short time, England even became a republic. The monarchy did come back, but the fighting wasn't over. It all culminated in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, where another king was kicked out, and this time Parliament made sure it had the upper hand for good by passing the Bill of Rights. Okay, let's move on. In this next phase, England becomes the core of a brand new nation, Great Britain, and the engine of a global industrial empire. So through a couple of major political moves, England became part of something bigger. In 1707, the Act of Union with Scotland created the Kingdom of Great Britain. Then, in 1801, another union with Ireland created the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. And while all this political change was happening, something else was brewing that would change not just England, but the entire world: the Industrial Revolution. All these technological breakthroughs in the 18th and 19th centuries turned England into the world's very first industrial society, totally transforming its economy and landscape. This new industrial power is exactly what fueled Britain's ability to build a massive colonial empire, the largest the world had ever seen. With England right at the political and economic center, this empire stretched across the globe. And that brings us to our final section. Let's take a look at how England navigated the wild ride of the 20th century and tried to find its place in the modern world. So the last 100 years or so have seen some massive shifts. The two world wars took an incredible toll, weakening Britain's power on the world stage. That led to decolonization, where most of the empire's territories became independent. Then you have the whole European Union story, joining in '73 and then voting to leave in 2020. And on top of all that, power has been devolved to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, which, raises some pretty big questions about England's own role. When you look back, England's history is just this incredible story of constant change. It's a story of invasion and settlement, of civil war and union, of building an empire and then letting it go. Its future, both within the UK and in a post-Brexit world, really is still being written. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this and want to understand more about how our world was shaped, definitely subscribe to Notebook Summaries and be sure to check out the other explainers in our Quick Country Histories playlist.